Hey everybody, this is Josh with Homesteading Family. And the snow is melting, the days are starting to warm a little bit, and while spring is a little ways off, there's a lot to do to get ready for garden season. Last week I shared with you guys some tips for garden planning, and this week I wanted to share with you some of the most common mistakes that beginning gardeners and seasoned gardeners make. So come on inside and we'll check those out. Okay, so let's talk about the 10 most common mistakes that beginning gardeners and advanced gardeners make so that we can avoid them this year as we're getting ready for garden season and planning things out. I'm going to start with the least problematic, number 10, on to number 1, which will be the largest mistake. Alrighty? Okay, number 10. Wrong plants. So, people choosing the wrong plants for their location. We've all got an idea about what we want to grow or what we think should be in a garden, but that doesn't always fit with your location. If you're in the desert and you don't have a lot of shade, some of your cooler season crops, your brassicas, your lettuces, you're going to have a really hard time. Likewise, if you're way north, things like tomatoes, corn, cucumbers, some of your real hot season plants that like hotter weather, hotter temperatures, you're going to struggle with those unless you've got a way to overcome your environment, greenhouse, you know, some way to overcome that. So for beginners especially, my tips for getting started is 1, find out what grows well in your area. If you're just getting going, or if you've just moved to a new area and even if you've been gardening for a while, so the first thing we do and the few moves that we've made is go talk to your neighbors. Go talk to people that are gardening and find out what's growing well for them. That's a great place to start. And then you can take that and add to it what it is you like. Okay, I mean, you don't want to grow it just because it grows well if it's not something you're going to eat. That's a waste of effort. So find out what grows well in your area, combine that with what you like in that list, and then from there, as you improve in your gardening skills, as you improve your soil, as you expand, then you can move into other plants, other varieties, and see what works for you. Okay, so make sure you're getting the correct plants for your area. Okay, number 9 is weeds. Letting weeds get out of control. Now, we all know it, and we don't want to let those weeds get out of control, but it happens. And so, you know, what is a weed? A weed's basically anything you don't want in your garden, right? And it's easy in the beginning. They're small. Weather's a little cooler, they don't come up real fast, but they can catch up on you quick if you're not being diligent in your garden. So you've got to keep the weeds under control from the beginning, however you do that. Hopefully not with herbicides, that's ultimately damaging your soil and your plants. But there's a variety of methods, and whichever you choose, you want to keep those weeds under control. All right, number 8. Too big of a garden. And this is a really easy one for beginning gardeners. And man, you just want to get out there and you want to plant it all up. You've got an exciting vision for a large garden and filling up the pantry. But people tend to go too big, too much space, and it's a lot of work. And so, kind of like the plants, go back down, start with a little space. And if you've never gardened before, 100 to 200 square feet per person. It's plenty. Work up from there. But avoid going too big in the beginning and learn as you grow. And that can even be true for a seasoned gardener in a new region, new piece of property, new region. Every property's got its microclimates, and there's just a learning curve no matter what. And so keep it a little smaller and grow out into your space, and you will develop more successes and less failures. Okay, 7. Monocropping. A little wiggle in my board. Planting the same varieties without any diversity, and especially without crop rotation. So at a bare minimum, if you're going to plant groups of tomatoes, groups of corn, all your different species, then you need to rotate your crops. But what is even better is to find out some companion planting and mixing up your crops. This creates a greater diversity in the soil biology, helps the soil be healthy. It also breaks up the planting, and it makes it harder for pests to even find the plants. When you have a big group of tomatoes, or potatoes, for us it's cabbage, we have flea beetles, and so if we plant a big crop of those, it's very easy and attractive for the pests to find it. But when you start to intermix your varieties and your plants, then that creates diversity, that creates health, and it makes it harder for those pests to get going. So do a little research, find out what varieties go well together. You can even add flowers. We do things like marigolds in our flowers, which marigolds in our tomatoes, and that helps deter pests. There's a whole lot of things you can do. I can't cover that here, but look into breaking it up and creating diversity within your garden, and still maybe some rotation year after year. All right, number 6 is improper watering. And especially overwatering. We tend to overwater. We don't want to let things dry out, but root systems in the plants also need oxygen. So depending on your soil, if you overwater and that soil is not well draining, you're going to lose oxygenation and you're going to drown your plants. And another common problem is you think you're watering real heavily, but you're actually underwatering. And if you've ever seen this, you water real heavy, it looks like it's soaking in, but then if you dig into the soil a little bit, it's only, about that much moisture saturation. And so you've got to make sure that you are also watering enough and that the soil is saturating all the way down and staying moist all the way through. So the way to avoid this is to regularly dig into your soil in different places and make sure that it's not too wet or too dry, and then you can adjust accordingly. Okay, number 5. Too many chemicals. Okay. Too much herbicide, too much pesticide, maybe too much fungicide. And, to me, any is too much. But people tend to get aggressive with solving a problem and really over-apply. And you're going to toxify your soil and toxify the plant. There are a lot of ways to deal with pests and weeds and other issues besides putting on chemicals. So watch out for that, and I'd encourage you not to use them at all. For soil health, for your own health, we want to avoid those chemicals. Even chemical fertilizers, they can cause salinity. They're not improving the health of your soil, and they're actually not really improving the health of your plants. They may help with growth or fruit production, but those chemical fertilizers in the end are deteriorating your soil, and they're giving you a false sense of success in nutrition. And another one that's not chemicals, but is over nitrating the soil through manures. If your manure is too hot, if it hasn't had a chance to break down yet, or if you're adding, you know, a chemical nitrogen product, and it may look like you're getting a lot of good growth, but in reality, you're just getting that green growth. You'll find out later that your plants aren't fruiting, and if you get too much in there, it's going to burn them. So we want to find other ways to improve the health of our soil so that we have strong, healthy plants that produce a fruit for us that is abundant, yet still nutritious. And we can do that without all of this. Okay, number 4. Timing. Or another way to say that is planting out of season. And the biggest problem is planting too early. We get ahead of ourselves. We're excited to get things going. Maybe we're not waiting for that last frost. You know, whatever it is, we need to get the timing right. And you guys have probably seen this before. I love these little garden planners. This one is Clyde's. And that can really help you create a schedule so that you get your timing right, and you're not too early and you're not too late, and you're working with the seasons. Number 3 is spacing. And usually what folks are doing is putting things too close, and that is so easy to do, and it's a big one. We're getting to number 3, and it's very easy to plant too densely. When you're putting seeds in the ground, and you know, you've read your spacing on your squash plant and it says it needs 4 foot by 4 foot, or even bigger sometimes for some of your, say, winter squashes, and you're just putting seeds in the ground, or you've got a little start that you started indoors, and it can be tough to want to space them that far apart. And but you've got to give the plants room to grow. Even plants that may grow vertically often have a larger root base, and they need, just like they need room above to get sunlight, have some oxygen flowing between the plants, the roots need the same thing. They need space down there to compete for resources. And while there are some strategies where you can plant very densely, you've got to be careful about it. So start with recommended spacing, and as you develop over time, you may be able to learn how to, and as you develop your soil, how to bring that spacing in tighter, work with different varieties. But don't overplant your garden. Alrighty, and number 2, we're getting up there, and this is a major one. Number 1 and 2 are far and beyond the biggest problems, the biggest mistakes that gardeners make, and that is taking care of your soil health. Modern agriculture treats soil like it is just a structure to hold the plant up, and we can just add the nutrients and you know, to the soil and let the plants uptake them. We can add pesticides, herbicides to control our problems, but that deteriorates soil health. Just like if you were to eat a lot of junk food, not get any exercise, and then go outside with no clothes on in the extreme heat or the extreme cold, it's going to make you sick, right? And so we want to take care of that soil health. We want to be building the soil, putting the correct nutrients into it. We want to be clothing it with mulch. We want to be adding organic material, humus, to it via compost every year, and building up soil health. We cannot ignore that. We may apply fertilizers, chemical fertilizers, and feel like we're raising healthy plants and we're raising healthy food, but we're not. It's just, in the end, you're breaking down the health of your soil, and it's not sustainable. So, and that's where, as your soil health deteriorates, that's where your pests start coming in. That's where your weeds can get out of control. Fungus can get out of control. So we have got to take care of our soil health. Okay, and number 1, the biggest mistake that we all make, beginners and even seasoned gardeners sometimes, is location. where we put our garden. And a lot of the times we put it where it seems convenient to us, but it may end up with not enough sunlight. Sometimes it could be too much sunlight. Not all varieties need 12 hours of intense sunlight. And so if you're in a hotter climate, drier climate, you may actually want more shade. Or depending on what you're wanting to grow, certain varieties in your environment may do well. So we've got to pay attention to, are we overshading? Are we undershading? Are we getting too much sun? Is it a low spot that tends to bog out during the rainy season and get too wet? Even you may not see it on the surface, but the ground, if it's a low spot, is holding the water, and so you're getting some root rot, which is going to cause fungus issues and other problems. Too high and dry. If you've got well draining soil and that garden's up on a slope somewhere in a spot that you're having a hard time retaining water, that can be a problem as well. So think a lot about your garden location. And another big problem is that people put it too far away. And when it gets too far away, when it's out of sight, it becomes out of mind. And so if you start to compound some of these mistakes that we were talking about, you put your garden too far away, it's in a spot that is too hot, maybe it's really big, and problems can start to get out of control real quick. So when you've got that location, one that's just good for the garden, it's got appropriate sun, it's got appropriate shade if necessary, if you're in one of those environments where that's useful. You can get water to it easily, and you can interact with your garden. You're going to avoid a lot of the problems, and you're going to give it the proper care and just be able to give it where it needs. And so with that, I want to encourage you guys to think about breaking your garden up. It doesn't just have to be a big rectangle out there in the backyard or out in the field. Think about what can come close to your house. You might be able to create a little vegetable garden and an herb garden close to your house somewhere and break up some that gets more sun, another area that gets a little more shade for some of your cooler season varieties, and the varieties that you interact with more during the season, your leafy greens, some of your beans, some things that you may harvest regularly, bring those in a little closer. Some of your varieties, your corns, your winter squashes, different things that you're going to harvest once, twice a year, just going to be out there a few times once it gets going. Put those out a little bit further and get creative with what you can do in your yard and find little niches and spaces. But that location, that's the biggest mistake that folks make. And so if you get that right, and you've got that especially close to you, I just really want to emphasize that, to keep your garden as close as you can and still make sure it's getting its needs. You're going to avoid a lot of the other mistakes because you're just going to be engaged. You're going to be out there. You're going to know what's going on with your soil. You're going to know what's going on with your water, if it's getting enough water or too much. And you're going to stay on top of the weeds, however you manage those. And you're just setting yourself up for success when you get the right location. Well, there's your 10 most common gardener mistakes. And if you can avoid most of those, you're going to be off to a great garden season. I'll see you soon.